Hello and welcome to the home of the Ghost Owl, and here we are for another one of our videos looking at Total Warhammer 3. And this time I thought I would just share with you a short video on what my favourite mods in the game currently are. Now there are tons of them on the Steam workshop page, and it very much is personal flavour, personal choice. Some people like to play only vanilla with no mods at all. Some people like to play with a game completely overhauled. Now I fit somewhere in between that, and you'll see the sort of mods I'm taking very much either cosmetic or quality of life, or maybe that fits a little bit more of my feel, how I think the game is, as opposed to being a total overhaul. So without further ado, let's look at the first page of the mods we've got. So the first one there is what I consider probably the most important mod on the list, which is the community bug fix mod. Now it does exactly what it says. It fixes numerous in-game bugs, which, let's face it, should have been fixed by Creative Assembly, and I think it's a bit shameful that the community is able to put something like this together and Creative Assembly doesn't address it in a quicker time frame. Now obviously resources do make a difference, but let's not go into that debate. But if we look at what this mod says, so if we say what it does, this mod fixes a bunch of bugs. It's a community project out of passion. For the most part, we attempt to have standards for how we implement fixes with as much compatibility with other mods as possible and as little gameplay altering decisions made as possible. It should all be done in a way that makes you feel like you're not even using a mod at all, and I think that's really, really important for those of you out there that like to play the game completely vanilla but don't want to have a whole host of bugs in the game. This is the mod for you. I thoroughly recommend it, even for those that don't like to play with mods, because as it says here, the aim of this mod is to not even make it feel like you're playing with a mod. It's just fixing those in-game issues. So that is the first one, as I say, probably the most important I would consider on the list. So next is defensive supply removed. Again, does what it says. It means that both you and the AI will not have any defensive supply. Therefore, when you are attacking settlements, neither you nor the AI will be able to build these pop-up towers and pop-up barricades. Personally, that's how I prefer to play the game. I don't like the pop-up towers. The pop-up towers don't even look like the towers that should be used by the faction, because it's just a generic skin to start with. I hate the fact they pop up mid-battle. If you were ever going to do such a thing, then it should have been put up before the battle started, and the barricades just seem to cause so many more pathing issues, even more than there already are within these maze and labyrinth-like settlements. Please bring back something different. Even Total Warhammer 2 was better than what we have today. So for me, defensive supply removed, no more tower defense. You're going into the settlement as is. There are no towers, pop-up towers at all, and there are no pop-up barricades. So the only towers in the settlement are those on the walls. Next up is Tier 3 Walls Returned. Now, I know this obviously was taken away, a lot of complaint about settlement battles and too many minor settlement battles and so on, which I get, and there is in the game an awful lot of minor settlement battles. So I really do like the fact that if it's a level 1 or 2 settlement, it's a field battle. If you get to level 3, then it becomes a minor settlement battle. But for me, if you're going to invest in a tier 3 settlement and invest in a max level garrison building, I think you should get walls with that. And that's how I prefer to play. So, yes, I think this is good. And if you combine it with a mod that I'm going to talk about later, which is the Garrison Upgrade mod, it does have an impact on the game slightly in terms of slowing down the rate at which territory changes hands, because capturing a settlement is now more of an investment. Again, that is how I prefer to play. But I think if you're going to max out a settlement, particularly a minor one, and you're going to max out a garrison building in a minor settlement, which, let's face it, has 4 slots, And often there's a lot of competing buildings for that. So if you're going to give up one of those slots and max out a garrison building, then you should get walls. So I have this mod. Next up, we have climate adaptation. So essentially what this means is that longer that you spend in a settlement, and longer that you have a settlement in unhospitable climate, for example, the more that you adapt to it. So if I actually read this one out, so this mod will allow a faction to gradually adapt to a region's unsuitable climate and slowly reduce the debuff every turn until it's completely removed. However, if the region is captured or destroyed by another faction, you will need to start over. So I really like this. I think it's reasonable as well if you thought about it. You know, somebody that had built a town and a city, and they were there long enough, they'd eventually adapt to the climate. And I think this is better in game as well. And I think it opens up the game to some factions that either start in pretty poor starting areas where they're surrounded by unsuitable terrain. I think it lessens the impact on those, makes it more balanced across the board, not 100%, but closer. So I think overall, this is a good mod, and I think definitely does benefit some factions that have some poor starting areas, particularly with regard to that unsuitable terrain. Next up, we have simple dynamic settlements. This is very much a cosmetic mod. Again, I really like this one. And one of the biggest things you notice, like you capture an ogre camp, for example, and you're a high elf, it still looks like an ogre camp. So even when you get to level 5, it doesn't look like a high elf city. So essentially what this does is it converts the city, once captured, to looking like the city of the owning faction. Again, it's very much cosmetic, it's very much personal preference, but if I'm playing a high elf or a dark elf or whichever a vampire faction, I think it's really cool when your cities look like they're owned by the vampire faction, especially given that, you know, when you've got corruption on the land, for example, you know, you can have situations where you've, you know, got undead vampiric corruption all across the ground, but it doesn't have a vampire looking city. So I actually really like simple dynamic settlements. Just to note, when you go into the game, you're going to get a box that says initialize. You click that and the game freezes. This is supposed to happen. It's just looking at all the settlements at the very start of the game. You don't have to do this every time you load up a save. It's just the very first time you start a campaign. You click initialize, you wait less than a minute, depending on obviously the speed of your computer, but less than a minute, the game is frozen. And once you see the banners or cloaks or whatever, or you know, the wind rushing around, moving, then you know that the initialization has been done. It's supposed to do this, so no, your game hasn't frozen or crashed. But again, I really like this. I think it's nice to have your cities look like the faction that owns them wherever they are. Okay, so that is the first set of 5. Let's look at what we've got next. So next up, we've got unique faction UI. Again, this is very much cosmetic flavor, and I feel personally that it brings out more the feel of playing those different factions. So the UI essentially is tailored to the faction that you're playing, whatever it happens to be, chaos, vampire, whatever. And it just gives you that feel. You know, straight away, you look at the screen, you've done nothing. You know, you can see, you know, you're playing a different faction. It's just that, it's more mental, I suspect, than anything. But you know, you see that feel of the faction that you're playing, and I just think it's really nice. As I say, it's very much, again, personal choice, cosmetic flavour. If we look at the next one, which is reloading animations, again, cosmetic flavor, adding animations to gunpowder infantry. So you can see here, so adds reloading animations to the following units for now. Kislev Streltsy, Dwarf Thunderers, Empire Handgunners, Sylvanian Handgunners, Vampire Coast Gunnery White, Free Company Militia, Sartosa Militia, and all Witch Hunter variants. So essentially, you're actually going to get a proper reloading animation for these gunpowder units. They're going to go down in the knees. They're going to put the ramrods in and that sort of stuff. I just think it makes it look pretty cool. Often I'm zooming in onto units when they're fighting, just for that immersion element of it. So I really like this. And again, it's cosmetic. It doesn't actually change how the game plays, but I think it looks pretty cool, and it just gives you that nice flavour, particularly if you like zooming in on your units when they're fighting. Next up is Better Camera Mod. Now, essentially, this gives you more options for heights of the camera, both closer in and further out, and is much better for screenshots. So this simple mod allows both closer and further camera heights, more suitable for better screenshots and a nicer view of the battlefield. You get a nice hotkey for turning the UI off if you're going for a cinematic view, as a key to zoom out without unit disappearing, and another one to get even more cinematic view of the battle overall. Obviously, it's very good if you're creating content or you like taking screenshots or videos and that sort of thing. So definitely worthwhile there. But overall, I think, if you like playing the game, instead, if you like zooming in on your units when they're fighting, or you like to zoom out on the battlefield and see the whole thing, Better Camera Mod, again, personal choice, but doesn't change how the game plays, and a very nice mod. Next up is a Button Respec. Now, I think this is crazy that this is not in the game already as part of the game. I think it's absolutely critical and important, and essentially what it is this mod adds a button to the character skills panel, which can be used to reset the skills of a character. Now, the important thing here is it can only be done once in the game, so you only get one chance with each lord to do it. So you can't just keep having a lord, train him up, change him, train him up, change him. You've got to do something different. You've got to do it once, and it costs 1,000 gold or favour to do so. When does this really matter? So there's two situations. One is you've got that lord you've been playing from the beginning of the game, and you start the game, you're playing with very low tier units, and you're running around. Let's take high elves. You're running around with a bunch of spearmen and archers and so on, and you're going to want to potentially buff them. So you take the skills for buffing the army. Well, what this allows you to do is once you get into the late game, once you could respec him for now he could give buffs to those Phoenix Guard or Dragons or Dragon Knights and so on. So you've got that option to play the Lord how he's kind of would be in the early game, and then change his skill set for the late game. The other part of it, and I think even more important, is when you either confederate a faction, or if you've got the mods such as recruit defeated legendary lords, and you gain lords from other factions. Now, they've already been trained up by the AI, and often their character skills aren't going to be what you would choose, and this gives you that one-time option to reset that character. You don't lose the skill points, it basically just wipes it in. If the character's rank 14, he stays rank 14, but you've now reset the sheet, so you've now got 14 skill points to put where you want. So I think it's really, really important mod to have. I think it should be in the game already, even though it's not. And yeah, really, really good mod for the game. Now, the next one is going to be very much personal choice. Now, this is Garrison Upgrade All-in-One. Now, what this does is it improves the garrisons to make them tougher. Garrisons, as you've seen between Warhammer 2 and Warhammer 3, are significantly weaker in Warhammer 3. And what this means is that territory can change hands rapidly, backwards and forwards. Very weak rogue or enemy armies, very weak ones, can run around in your backfield, particularly in the mid-game where you've expanded, can run around behind your lines, and they'll never go for a province capital. They'll just go for lots of minor settlements, and they'll just run round rampant, destroying, razing, capturing minor settlements with very little you can do until you've either built an army up or sent one back, which can sometimes be quite a long way from the front line. So you have that option of being your own territory becoming a little bit more defensible because you've got a better garrison, but it does slow the changeover. Now, it does apply to the AI as well. And what this means is both the player and the AI need more investment to capture settlements, be it minor or province capitals. And I prefer that. I think if you're going to take a town or a city, it should be more of an investment than one lord with a few archers and spearmen, and we are talking a few running around just taking everything out. So this is definitely personal preference. I prefer a slower changeover of game. I'm more of an empire builder person, someone that's going to paint a region or a map, for example, and so I prefer the ability to slower to capture it, but easier to hold on to it when you do. And that's just how I prefer it. So if we look at the mod itself, made this by request, all of my garrison upgrade mods all in one, so this applies to all factions. Some of the garrisons in the mod are balanced a bit due to request, making them slightly different from the individual ones. It can be added or removed during a campaign, not compatible with anything else that modifies garrisons. So changes units and unit priority from wall buildings. Factions without wall buildings get the garrison from the main building, and it works for the AI too. So there you go. That is this mod. I really like it. I think it's great. It suits the way I like to play the game. So yeah, thoroughly recommended. Now on to the last mod, and in terms of how the game plays, probably my favorite one overall, because again, this is just personal to me, which is if I'm playing vampire faction or the high elf faction or whichever faction, often I'd like to confederate all the lords if you can, but it's almost impossible to confederate all the lords of your faction because they're going to get defeated most of the time long before you get a chance to confederate them. You might confederate 2 or 3, but if you're in factions like High Elves or Lizard Men where they've got, 6 or 7 legendary lords, you're never going to get to them before they're all defeated. So what this does is when a faction within the, if you take High Elves, for example, when Imric's faction is completely wiped out, you get an option to accept that lord into your ranks. Now, the good thing is here, it doesn't just automatically happen. You get an option to allow him in, you get an option to delay it, or you even get an option to turn them away. And if you can do this in a co-op campaign as well, so you could, if you were both playing the same faction, then you're playing Tomb Kings, for example, Katep's defeated and I'm playing Cetra, I could refuse Katep, but my friend who's playing co-op Calida could then get Katep instead. So it's really, really nice, works really well with co-op games as well. So, it also offers where you get the confederation, I find, can be fickle. And so, sometimes take Ulthwan, for example, confederating with a Lariel or Atharian can sometimes be a challenge depending on what's happening in the game. It does give you that option to go to war with that faction, wipe them out, and then you get the Lord that way. So personally, I like this. I think it's probably my favorite of the mods which change kind of how the game plays. Now, what you'll see here is nothing here is completely overhauling the game. The biggest ones being the Garrison upgrade and the tier 3 walls. That changes the pace of the game. Most of the other things are, say, quality of life with 1 button respec or a lot of cosmetic stuff. And a bunch of bug fixes. But recruit defeated legendary lords, I think, is really nice. You're playing with vampires and you're playing as Vlad. Well, now you get the option to have Manfred and Heinrich Kemmler, and you get to play with them, level up their skill tree, sometimes do their quest battles and that sort of thing. And it gives you the option for different flavor of armies as well, because, certain lords give you, different bonuses to certain types of units. So it allows you to make an army that is, heavy on missile units to using a legendary lord who's giving bonuses to cavalry, and you can make a stronger cavalry army, for example. So I think it does bring some nice variety into a campaign, particularly if you're like me, which are playing generally longer campaigns. So I don't generally play a campaign for 50 turns and then ditch it. I do that for making content, but when I'm playing a campaign for myself, I'm there painting the map, and I'll be in 2, 3, even 400 turns, conquering as much of the map as possible, going for not just the long victory but the conquest victory as well. So I think recruit defeated legendary lords is important when playing the game that way. And there you go. That is the end of this video, looking at what my personal favourite mods are for Total Warhammer 3. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. Let me know why in the comments down below. And in the notes down below, you're going to see I'll post links to all of these mods for ease of finding the right one. So please check that out. And if you like the content and you want to see more and you haven't subscribed already, please hit the subscribe button. It's free for you to do and it means a lot for me. So thank you for that in advance. You've been watching The Ghost Owl, and I'll see you very soon.